Hello and welcome back to Veteran Instincts. This week we bring you another match from the ongoing Kyber Cup run by the guys at Hexiled Gaming, who have an amazing stream that you should all be checking out, subscribing to if you haven't already. This match is between Marcel Manzano and our guest today, Scott Crossfield. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So this is from the third round, so we're going back a little bit, but a really interesting match. Lloyd's been really excited to get this one on to talk about, and I actually, for once, have not seen it before the commentary, so you're going to get my fresh opinions. Scott, starting with you, why don't you take us through your list and tell us a little bit about why you chose?
Sure. So I guess at this point it's a pretty classic list. Torkhil Mux with Moldy Crow, Captain Seevor, and 3 Cartel Marauders. The past few points updates, this has actually dropped about 5 points, and that was enough for the hull upgrade. And I was debating a hull upgrade on Torkhil, which I think synergizes really well with Moldy Crow for survivability, or upping my cartels to Initiative 3. But I figured with the Torkhil initiative bonus, I should just go all in on the survivability for Torkhil, since he's usually the top target besides Seevor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Torkhil, I'm sure most of our viewers know, but he, at the start of the engagement phase, selects a ship in his firing arcs and reduces his initiative to 0. So yeah, at that point, spending points to up the initiative of your Marauders seems less valuable than just keeping Torkhil alive. And was it a list that you'd played a lot with before?
A fair bit. I took it to the Las Vegas Open, went 3-3 at the tournament there, but it's something I've had a lot of experience with, and I have a lot of historical experience with like 7-ship scummy jank type stuff, and this is a little bit fewer ships, but a lot more quality per ship. So this is pretty close to something that I like to play naturally.
And, I think those couple of extra points the list has gotten since, I think the first time I saw this list was probably around about Worlds 2019. And those couple of extra points allow you to do a couple of things. So obviously Seevor can take a crack shot or something like that to double down on how much he's doing in the initial pass. I've seen Torkhil with Zam a few times just to make Torkhil a bit more offensively scary, but I do think the hull upgrade is the best and most successful way to do it. The list hinges on keeping Torkhil around as long as possible. So I like the decision you've gone with on this.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. Torkhil he's got to stay up, and a big reason I brought this list to this tournament was because the thread tracers had just come out. So what this list does against that made me really push me over the edge to take this was Seevor can jam a thread tracer on some sort of bomber or separatist swarm, and Torkhil can make the second thread tracer Initiative 0, effectively negating, at least for a turn, the thread tracer Alpha Strike. It's not really relevant to this list that I'm playing, but that was why I took this one.
Yeah, and really nice as well. You need an answer for thread tracers, but as you beautifully pointed out, really you need an answer for 2 thread tracers, because most lists will run 2. If one of your thread tracers gets alpha striked off the board before it comes to fire, then you're still okay, you've got the second. But yeah, as you explained, Scott, this really nicely has an answer for not 1 but 2. And I imagine it really makes those lists unhappy if their offense goes away in the opening engagement. In a moment, we'll go to Lloyd to talk us through Marcel's list. But before we do, our eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that the overlay looks a little bit different today. The reason for that is that we've been donated this game by the guys over at Rookie One. They are based out of Minneapolis, tend to stream a lot of content from Hexiled and other online tournaments, and in their own words, have air quote expert X-Wing commentators. Lima Open and 2019 Seattle System Open semi-finalist Andy Myers, and 2020 Las Vegas Open finalist Paul Olsen. Their channel is highly recommended, and you guys should definitely be subscribing to it. So, Scott, we see the setup here. We've got a cluster of the smaller asteroids in the middle and some gas clouds spread out around the side. And you've set up in the one corner. Interesting setup from Marcel, kind of spread out across his borders. What were you thinking kind of going into turn 0? What were you hoping to get in terms of an asteroid cluster? And what were your thoughts sort of seeing the setup here before the game started?
I always deploy in one corner or the other, and I try and give myself a good turn in if I can. So you can see the left side that there's a gas cloud blocking the turn in from the bottom corner, but the top corner's got a good straight, and I could bank or hard turn in. There's a little bit of an alley there. I I put the gas clouds on his side, so he's going to fly past them immediately and hopefully not use them too much throughout the course of the game. And the asteroids, I just wanted to keep them small, and I just wanted to get away from them if I could. He's got more maneuverability than I do, so my goal was just to minimize the impact of any obstacle on this game because they're not going to be to my benefit.
And I think there's a couple of interesting things already to talk about there. So you brought the small rocks, and by the sounds of things, if you could have taken no obstacles, you would have done.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of people default in that circumstance to the gas clouds because they kind of think, oh, if I've got a lot of ships, I can fly through them. I don't want to take damage or not be able to shoot. But actually, I really like taking the small rocks instead. I think it does two things. I think, one, they're smaller, so they take up less of the board. The gas clouds are that little bit bigger, even the smaller ones. And two, they don't offer the defensive benefit. So if you've got the punchy, aggressive list, the droid swarm, the Torkhil swarm, something like that, I think the small rocks are definitely the way to go. And the other thing you said was about sort of trying to get the gas clouds out of the way. Personally, when I'm trying to get obstacles out of the way, I like to place them on my side of the board so I can control flying past them. And I think most of the time that's the right approach. I think the reason that you're correct here in placing them on Marcel's side of the board is because of the speed of the A-Wings. It's really hard for Marcel to stay on that side of the board given the speed of his list. So it kind of in this instance, I think placing them far away from you is going to work for you. And as you say, you kind of already getting into position to kind of fly into that lane through the two asteroids at the top of the board there.
Right. As for Marcel's deployment, I'd actually looked up a couple of his games. He's on Gold Squadron. There's plenty of footage on this guy, and I'd seen this exact deployment a couple times before, so I knew one of the things he might do right away was bait me with ZZ straight across, which is exactly what he did. That's the red one. And his turn one bump with Merle, I felt pretty comfortable having seen this before.
And it is a list that is built to bait, to disengage, obviously with those rear arcs, but it also has the ability to turn in and hit really hard. So maybe he will just quickly run through the A-Wing list for everyone watching. So you have, importantly, but again perhaps not for this match, a bunch of I-5s, so 3 I-5 pilots. You have a 10-point bid. The list runs at 190 points. The 3 named A-Wings, ZZ, Tally, and Sefton, all have heroic marksmanship, proton rockets, and advanced optics. And then Merle, sitting down at I-1, has intimidation and automated targeting priority. So 3 sets of proton rockets. What are your thoughts in terms of how you're going to approach that and how you're going to try and weather them? Obviously, the ability from Torkhil helps somewhat, but is there a thought for what you want an engagement to look like?
Not really. My hope is to catch an A-Wing and just get ahead, but just hope the list as it's built can handle it with Initiative 0, and maybe Seevor can jam off the focus or shoot off the focus if they're Initiative 0. Apart from that, I didn't really have any plan on dealing with those proton rockets.
For sure. It feels like the kind of matchup where, as I say, Marcel's got the ability to hit really hard, but if he brings in just one ship to do that, it stands a very high chance of getting initiative killed. So for him, he needs to work out whether he's going to use the A-Wings in a very kind of baiting and try and just chip damage him very slowly over time. But if he's doing that, he can't ever really afford to be taking more than 1 or 2 shots at a time because the A-Wings will wear down. Or, of course, can just blank out and take chunks of damage. And for you, it's that kind of trade-off of can you get to a point where you can just catch one and get a couple of shots in?
Yeah, the goal was to just rely on the 3 dice attacks. That's a lot of why Seevor is on the inside instead of hidden in the back to provide extended value. I figure with those squirrely A-Wings, Seevor's time on target might not be as high as it could, and those mining guild ties don't have the best style anyways. So that's why I put the Khiraxz on the inside and Seevor on the outside. I actually preferred Seevor to get shot first if anybody would, just because I valued the 3 dice so much against those A-Wings.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. I was sitting looking at Seevor's position and not liking it because he was sort of obstructed by the rock. But thankfully, you guys gave me long enough to realise that as a mining guild tie, he doesn't really mind about that. I think what you're saying is really interesting. That we've had a couple of games on recently where the target priority has been really key, and knowing that from the start of the game has been very important to the game being won or lost. Actually, this is a kind of strange matchup for you because I don't think it really matters what you kill first. I think as long as you trap and shoot something, you're pretty happy. ZZ is less likely to take damage than her wingmates, But if she's the only thing available to shoot, then you can go for it. And I think you just need bodies off the board, and it doesn't really matter what order that happens in. And for Marcel, I think Torkhil is the obvious first target, but because he's so obvious, it's unlikely that you're going to give him the opportunity to shoot Torkhil without taking a lot of fire in return. The Seevor move here is interesting. Obviously, everything kind of continue up the board edge apart from Seevor, who's headed in. What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, this is just me being a passive player. The Khiraxz probably should have banked in here. There was nobody over in that corner even a turn ago, and I'm just slow rolling to buy time to get positioning, and I think it's a little bit too slow because Seevor, I mean, he's a little extended out by himself right now. That's why he did the one turn, just to try and dodge as many arcs as he could. No, I'm not too happy with the main body movement on my turn this year.
I think there's pros and cons, right? I think you're right. You've kind of hung Seevor out to dry a little bit, although it looks like he's probably only taking the one shot. He's got the evade. Hopefully we'll be fine. We see that coming in here. A nice 2 crits, not what you want to see on a ship with no shields.
Right.
But okay, rolls enough paint and is gonna not pay too dearly for his positioning, and that is going to be the only shot this turn. So I think the kind of downside is Seevor's out on his own a little bit, but actually these Khiraxz are in a really nice position this turn to kind of hard turn in and really threaten the center of the board and make it difficult for Marcel, especially with red and green, as to decide where he's going.
Yes, and actually watching this again, I remember that part of my thinking was just to do that so the turn in could avoid those rocks, because I don't want a one turn and try and squeeze between those 3 rocks or anything. I just want to get away from them as best as I can.
Yeah, always be sort of trying to have the fight in an open area of the board. I think that's really sensible. Like from Marcel's point of view, Merle in an interesting position here, kind of got quite a safe route onto the flank. You've got to imagine that Scott isn't going to gamble on sending his entire list into that corner of the board. But Merle's a bit of a weird person to be flanking with. You don't really want her on the flank. She's got 2 attack dice, doesn't have the proton rockets, and it isn't really going to be much of a worry. How do you see kind of things even at this early stage with the positioning?
I think that's the exact thought I was having, actually. I really like the position Merle is in. I just wish it was any other A-Wing other than Merle, because it is the least intimidating one. I suppose the counter to that is it's the one least likely to get turned on. So you could disengage with all of the I-5s potentially and keep them safe, and then just get Merle into the side or back of the list, where they can just happily chip away damage for foreseeable future. But if it was any other ship, I'd feel much, much happier about it, because then you have the ability to react to Scott's positioning, because Merle is going to be doing it I1 and is going to go in, decide to take focus, and then reposition accordingly, but with no extra information.
Yeah, I do take your point, though. I think if it was Tali or Sefton, you might be a bit more worried about committing to that corner, because there's it's a more tempting target for Scott.
Conversely, though, I'm not sure about where Zizi is. With that boost forward to get the shot into Seevor, it does leave you very limited options in terms of that little mustache rock in the centre of the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking exactly the same thing. So the A-Wing has a lot of blues, but at the moment, almost all of them are over that rock. The 2 bank to the right certainly looks like it's going to be slap bang in the middle of the rock, and I don't love the 2 bank to the left either, although that may squeak by. And then you're kind of left doing the 2 hard, and the 2 hard in, I mean, is a complete no-no, right? You can't fly everything towards these Cartel Marauders, so maybe the turn away is the thing, and try and rotate the arc, get some rear arc fire in, hopefully kind of range control, and only end up with one of the Khiraxz shooting you feels like the best thing.
Scott, obviously you said that Marcel is a well-known and successful player, so you had the opportunity to go back and watch his games. We've had him on the channel, I think, twice already, and he does tend to be an aggressive player. Did you have any kind of indication of how he was going to approach from this point, or whether he was likely to turn in or turn away?
I was sure ZZ was going to bail out of there. Like had been said, he's not going into the heart of the swarm here. Though they can do some squirrely things when they want to. No, at this point, I'm just turning in, getting guns, and hoping really that the next turn I can lock something down or roll some dice at him.
And from the position you're in with these 1 turns coming in, the area of threat you have on the board is enormous, especially since 3 of your 4 ships in that group have 1 turns. The amount of space you're covering with arcs is absolutely enormous, right? And that's, again, part of the strength of the list. It does give the ability to herd and shepherd these A-Wings around into positions until they run out of options.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. The benefit of that straight maneuver up the board edge last turn is that had you banked, you'd kind of be committed to the centre of the board, no way to really get back into that top left-hand corner and threaten. But here, especially given the position that Merle's in, where he can't really come right next turn without flying over a gas cloud, and had everything disengaged, had Marcel turned the rest of his list away, you could easily spend a turn, 1 harding to the right, take Merle off the board, and then turn back again before the other A-Wings are involved. And I think that you wouldn't have had that opportunity if you'd banked in. So I really actually, although you were questioning it, I really like the decision to continue straight up the board edge the previous turn from this. As it is, Tali's turned in, and Sefton is also being aggressive. So I think that has given Merle a little bit of a stay of execution, and probably it means that you can't pounce on him next turn. And Tali at least has a proton torpedo lined up in quite a nice position. Looks like she's only going to be taking fire from the yellow Khiraxz, and so can probably afford to take this proton shot. We'll find out in a moment, but I think Sefton's proton torpedo is probably just out. And as it is, you probably don't want to spend 2 of your 3 proton torpedoes taking a TIE fighter off the board. What do you think, Lloyd?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because ordinarily I'd say you're absolutely right, but in a match against Torkhil and Seevor, Seevor can automatically remove that A-Wings only token. And so, A-Wings with heroic, with a focus token, as much as they have the ability to tank a lot of shots, without that token, they have the ability to die incredibly quickly. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because every ship is very threatening in its own way. The Khiraxz is very obvious. They have just a lot of dice. But Seevor's ability to take away so many of your defensive mods and your ability to survive is a real issue for the A-Wings.
Yeah, and we see exactly that here. So Marcel decided to focus fire, which I think is sensible. ZZ fires first, gets the token jammed off by Seevor, who ZZ's in the arc of, rolling 1 hit, which was naturally evaded. I quite question the decision to fire with Sefton here. You're presumably going to take the procket shot here, so I would have done that first. And if you one-shot the TIE fighter, then Sefton has a free extra shot into a Khiraxz. As it was, Sefton getting poor attack dice and Seevor yet to take damage. And we do indeed get the procket shot here. So this is 5 dice. Only a focus for mods. I believe the average is 4, and that is above average. So it doesn't have to spend the focus. Uses marksmanship to get 3 hits and 2 crits, and that is scary. And in fact, that is dead. So the TIE fighter, unable to stand up to that offensive output, rolls the 1 evade, takes 2 hits and 2 crits, and is taken off the board. So an early loss of a ship there. Sefton could have had a bonus shot at this point, but I suppose range 3 into a Khiraxz with a focus token probably wouldn't have done any damage anyway. But yeah, I think if we're being hypercritical, I think that the order of attack there should have been the proton rocket first, and then the other 2 A-Wings following up if they need to.
I wonder whether the thought process was the Sefton shot, if you can chip a damage or 2 into Seevor, you can potentially save the proton rocket because you want them for the Khiraxzes. I think it's probably a little greedy maybe, but the proton rockets are such a threat for the Khiraxzes. If you can save them and just kill Seevor without it, then I think that probably helps.
Yeah, it's kind of zero sum that though, isn't it? Because either you save a proton rocket on yellow that you have to then line up to do damage, and it's tricky to get off, but you have that kind of damage spike available to you, or you spend it but have chipped 2 damage off yellow Khiraxz with the other shots, and I think you kind of end up in the same position either way, right? So yeah, but maybe neither here nor there. Red's shot there, nice early damage as well, chipping a damage through onto Tali, and we get a focus token here spent, but good evade roll, and only the 1 damage done. Scott, how are you feeling about that? Obviously not nice to lose a ship in the opening. Maybe a kind of result of, as you said, leaving Seevor slightly hung out to dry. But you do get a damage through on an A-Wing, and just wonder how worried you are by that outcome, or whether you were relatively happy.
I just thought it was typical. Seevor always dies in one shot. I didn't know what to do with him that turn. If I turned in, I was pretty sure I was going to get procketed, but if I go for the block and miss, then I'm taking 2 shots that I can't do anything about, maybe 3, depending on what ZZ did. I just thought my best bet was to stay put and at least try and trade a little bit if they came in. I wasn't too thrilled though.
It does feel like he died a little bit cheaply, but as you said at the start, right, having him on the outside, if you're going to lose a ship, he's the one that has the least damage output. And so if you've maybe traded him for a position where you have a turn to get guns onto A-Wings for 1 or 2 extra rounds, that then feels like a better trade.
Right, and I don't know if leaving Seevor inside was the right call or not, but that's what I wanted to happen. If one ship was going to get procketed, I wanted it to be Seevor, just to keep the guns alive.
Yeah, I think for me, in an ideal world, it would have been nice on the turn he kind of turned out to maybe bank him back towards your list and tuck him in behind. But as you both say, I think if you're going to lose a ship, he is probably the least damaging to lose in this matchup. And also, although you have lost him, I think that your position is pretty good. The A-Wings here are in a slightly tricky place. Maybe I'm going to reevaluate that as I say it. It's definitely an interesting turn, and you've given Marcel something to think about. What are your thoughts here in terms of the potential places that all of these A-Wings can be? And have you got a decision about who you're going to try and target and take off the table at this stage?
Yeah, so Merle is hitting the gas cloud, so he's probably banking out and is not shooting or engaging too hard this turn. ZZ in red is pointing away. She's not doing anything. So it's green and yellow, and I just don't see them going in with just the 2 of them. My thought this turn is that, having watched several of Marcel's games, trying to get a feel for how he flies, I'm going to try and catch one of them right here because I need to get ahead against a list like this if I can, or just delete an A-Wing. I don't know. I think they're all running away this turn, and I'm just going to try and move in such a way that I can get guns on one of them.
And yeah, I think we saw from last time we spoke about Merle having to go slow and having to sort of stick back, and now that means this turn he's a bit ineffectual because now he needs to, as you say, avoid the gas cloud. Roll around is going to be another sort of turn off shooting, and so it really limits the value that Marcel has gotten from that good position because of the initiative of the ship. And that allows you then, it frees you up to go and hunt the other 2, the I-5 A-Wings.
And we see exactly that with Merle taking out. Is that Khiraxz aggressive, hard turn from the Khiraxz, and looks better. The fact you're taking action that you've just missed that rock, that is incredibly well judged. So I thought on sort of I'm watching it there that was on the rock, which would have been a disaster.
It's a lot closer than I thought it was.
Looks like your thinking is similar to mine. I think you're right. I think these A-Wings are running away. I wonder whether Tali can hard to the left here, but I'm not convinced she can. And I think I'd be playing for the hard two to the right, as you are. I think I'd have been tempted to bring red down into a position to block the straight move. I'd be, given where you are now, I'd be slightly worried about the prospect of a 5 straight and sort of boost out and Tali getting out of trouble.
Yeah, it felt like a very classic kind of 50-50, right? It's either going hard right or fast left.
Yeah, and I felt like, I mean, as we can see here, we've got the hard right, and it's absolutely the right decision. I think I'd have been less definite, and I think I'd have brought 2 straight or 3 straight from where he was, blocked that straight, and my reasoning for that would have been that he probably gets a shot into Seftin. So sort of you haven't turned his gun off entirely. But as it is, Marcel is in a horrible position with Tali. Whole list pointing at him, and really you've looks like you should reap the dividends for being decisive and kind of picking a direction and going for it. And I think your thought process of going through these ships was really nice, and that's what I do as well, which is to start with the most obvious thing. So you went through really nicely. You're like, right, Merle, do I need to worry about him? No, I know where he's going. ZZ, okay, well, he's hard turning, probably to the right, so he can come back around. Whatever happens, he's not going to get a decent shot. So let's ignore him and let's focus your kind of mental energy on the 2 ships that you can deal with. I thought that was a really sensible way to do things, and certainly for newer players watching this, I'd recommend that approach of both with your opponent's ships and with your ships, get rid of the easy ones first, and then spend time focusing on your more difficult maneuvers or on your opponent's ships that are kind of more relevant to you. Tali deciding to focus and boost in here. It gets them a shot, which is useful. I wonder if the barrel roll away would have got out of the arc. I might have been tempted to barrel roll boost away, get out of the arc of Torkhil.
Yep, he talked about that specifically, and I'm glad he did what he did, just because I get more shots. I think he could have dodged an arc or 2, or got out of range 3 at least of Torkhil.
Yeah, it would have put him in quite an awkward position facing the board edge, and I think Tali would have died the next turn. But if Tali takes another turn to die, I think it drags your list out of position and puts Marcel back on the front foot in terms of the positioning. Whereas if she was to die here, I think you're still in quite a nice position to kind of pursue everything else, having not taken too much time to deal with Tali. And in terms of getting a shot, well, that's only useful if you're still alive, because you're going to be I0, and we can see exactly that. So going into the next attack phase here, we're going to have a couple of rear arc shots from A-Wings, it looks like, and then see whether 3 agility are going to bail Tali out of a bit of a sticky situation. So rear arc from ZZ, who did go right at range 3. Rolls hit focus. Decided not to stress, which I think is sensible, but does mean that that's only going to be the 1 hit going in. And a nice natural evade there from that Khiraxz, so not yet having to worry about spending its focus token. Here's Sefton's shot. Oh, exactly what you don't want to see on an advanced optics A-Wing. Decides not to spend by the looks of things, and I think that's probably sensible. There's a chance here that Red will get a shot into Sefton, and whilst losing Tali would be bad, losing Tali and then getting Sefton halved by a rogue Khiraxz shot would be disastrous. And so, Scott, we're onto your shots, all going quite nicely so far. If we ignore the fact you've lost a ship, so
right.
Nice, 3 hits from Torkhil there. Hawks really are incredible, right? All of these amazing abilities and just a massive gun as well. And not a good start from Tali. Already lost a shield from the first turn. Now down to 1 hull, and with another 3 potential shots coming in. So range 1, 4 hits, and that's a dead A-Wing. As easy as that. I'm sure I've seen people make it look difficult to kill these things, but Scott, obviously not.
No, this was this worked out pretty well.
And on to the next turn, and now that exactly what we're talking about, the loss of Seevor looked bad, but the trade in position, well worth it. We do indeed get that bonus shot. Wow, and your Khiraxz is really turning up this turn for you. 3 hits, going to be 4 agility from Sefton. Really good decision there not to spend the focus to chase that 1 hit. Could be looking at another dead A-Wing there if it wasn't for that. But as it is, spends the focus and takes a shield. Lloyd, this is looking pretty nice for Scott, but I really think in large part that's due to how hard he committed to where Tali was going to be. Maybe a stupid question given the outcome, but do you think that was the right decision, or would you have been more tempted to kind of spread your arcs a little bit more?
I don't necessarily know there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think it comes down to personal style and preference. I think your personal preference, Paul, is to be a bit more kind of keep your arcs wide and get shots onto something. So your likelihood of getting a shot is perhaps higher, but your likelihood of killing an A-Wing is lower. Whereas in this, obviously, Scott has gone hard for a ship, hard enough that Torkhil was target locking the ship before they'd moved. So really committing to that one part of the board with a specific ship, and obviously in this case getting it right and getting rewarded for it. I think maybe the question is more for Scott. Obviously we've seen in this turn, or in the turn just happened, that was your approach. Is that how you generally tend to feel when you're flying sort of heavy hitting generics?
Part of it was the name recognition of Marcel. I just figured I needed to get ahead and make a play. And I watched several of his games. I mean, this tournament is a 1 game a week tournament, so I had time to do a little bit of homework. And that turnout from yellow from Tally, that just felt right. It felt like he was going to go there, and I felt pretty comfortable making that call.
Nice, and it certainly paid off. Yeah, and Lloyd, you're absolutely right. Obviously, we play a lot together, and Lloyd knows my style. I think for me, I try and play the percentages, and this is maybe one of my weaknesses, I almost never think about the mentality of my opponent when it comes to where they will go. But the result is that I spread my arcs out more and I get less concentrated fire. Really interesting to hear there about the kind of homework side of things. And that is something that's pretty unique to these online tournaments where you get time in between games to go and look at what your opponent's been up to previously. Is that something you've been doing all the way through the tournament?
Oh, yeah. I'm looking up everybody that I can. Most of them have been playing TTS and they've got something online somewhere. My previous round opponent, same thing. I saw 2 games of his just to get a feel for what he does. And I don't know specifically if I learn anything, but it gives me some insight into just some intuition into what he's going to be doing.
Absolutely right. Between List Fortress, which gives you an idea of the kind of lists they tend to run and how successful they tend to be with it, and then obviously streamed videos. I suppose the only version of it we have in kind of, in inverted commas, real-life X-Wing is in 2-day tournaments where you make a cut and then you know who you're playing in the first round of the cut the next day, and so you have that kind of overnight period to research them, look at their games, get a feel for them, ask around, maybe see somebody who played them in Swiss and get that kind of information. But that feels like a much more condensed version of it than a once-a-week tournament.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. I mean, I think you're right, Scott. You're never going to get at, I know exactly what they're going to do under any circumstance, but it's definitely useful for getting that feel of, is this player someone who will disengage, who will be aggressive? Do they have set openings or do they tend to kind of mix things up? That's all useful information. And you're right, Lloyd, you can do it to some extent. I think I would probably urge caution if doing it in a 2-day event. I think at the end of a 2-day event, you're going to be knackered. It's 50-50 as to whether you're going to get more out of going and watching your opponent's stream games the previous day or just calming down, chilling out and getting a good night's sleep. Certainly, unless you've got kind of squad mates or friends that you really trust, I think getting back reps from other people is a real kind of double-edged sword. And there's certainly been times where I've given people advice. I can remember giving Dale advice at Nationals, and all it succeeded in doing was Dale attempted to play in a way that was kind of halfway between what he would do and what I would do, and ended up, not getting the result. And I think that kind of like secondhand information is not massively useful, but if you've got the opportunity to kind of spend time looking at the previous results yourself, making your own conclusions, that can be really useful. So we see here kind of a little bit of an off turn in terms of fighting. Scott, you getting your list turned around nicely, those 1-hards coming into play again, getting a few shots into Seftin here at range obstructed, and yet to do any damage, but not really taking any significant fire, maybe with the exception of Merle, who's kind of nicely got onto your flank. So we're going to see
this turn is sort of the inverse of the turn before, where Marcel had killed Seevor, but perhaps at the expense of a bit of position, and now this turn we see the same. Scott had killed Tally, but at the expense of a bit of a position. And so now Merle has the flank, whereas the A-Wings are spread out and have the opportunity to duck in and out as they wish.
Yeah, and I think the kind of key difference is that Scott sacrificed a bit of positioning, but not really in a way that Marcel could punish, whereas obviously Marcel, by committing to taking the TIE Fighter out on the first turn, really put Tali in a place that she had limited options to get out of. Merle there, I think, not able to do any damage. And again, a poor roll from Seftin, so no further damage done this turn. But crucially, Scott's got himself turned around nicely, but starting to get a little bit constrained by the rocks. You had that nice early engagement in open space and have been dragged into the rocks a little bit. At this stage, what are your thoughts? Are you kind of trying to pick another target? Or are you more interested about just getting back to an area of the board that you're happy in?
Yeah, let's see. What am I thinking here? I think green is going up the board probably. Red isn't going to go behind the gas cloud because then she's in a corner. So I think I'm just slow rolling, kind of splitting my focus maybe, which isn't great. But Torkhil can't go anywhere but straight, that lousy small rock. So he's going to go off and chase green, and my other 2 Khiraxz are going to try and put some pressure on ZZ, who isn't a great target to shoot at, but that's what I've got.
And the Khiraxz style is a weird one, isn't it? It's not a ship we see very often. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's a ship we don't ever see if Torkhil isn't also in the list. So it has those 1-hards that obviously allow it to kind of keep its arc swinging around pretty easily, and it does have one banks, but doesn't have a one forward. How do you find flying this versus sort of an X-wing or something along those lines?
I really miss not having a one forward. I mentioned earlier I used to play a lot of weird swarmy scum jank stuff, and I really relied on the one straight, like with the Z95s or the tugboats, and these guys not having that, I definitely feel that it's tough to fly these. I mean, they're not hard to fly, but it's tougher.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, how such a simple and small change really changes the way the ship has to run. I found the same running the Ita recently, where it doesn't have the one bank, and it's just completely alien to how I want to be running it.
I'm just this patient, slow guy, really. I'll let them move, and I'll try and catch somebody out or that sort of thing, and not being able to go as slow as I can. It's tough sometimes.
Yeah, I think other than that hard commit on Tatali early on, you've approached this game in a very similar way to how I would. You've obviously got a preference for the bullying lists, making conservative moves, and just kind of waiting for your opponent to make a mistake rather than going and trying to force the situation.
Right. If Zizi flies into the corner here, then I know I'll get shots the next turn, if not this turn.
Interesting. I was just about to talk about that. You said you didn't think she would do. And whilst I agree that normally flying into a corner is a bad thing, I think the thing that maybe changes my mind here is the position of the Yellow Marauder and of Torkhil. I don't hate the position. Like, they've both got kind of nice, easy, slow banks and straight maneuvers that are going to achieve two things. They're going to put pressure on Sefton so Sefton can't turn in, and they're going to open up that hard turn to the right, as we see here from Torkhil, to come around and pressure Zizi. I think Zizi needs to be looking at getting into a position where the turn after this, she is 5 straighting into the top right-hand corner of the board, because otherwise your whole list is going to collapse on her. And because of that, I think I'd have been tempted to come straight up into the corner, boost round, and try and run along that top board edge next turn. Now, I say all of that, and I think the thing that I wouldn't have anticipated is that talent roll, and I think that talent roll is wonderful. So tell me about that. Was that kind of like immediately kind of popped into your mind as soon as you saw the positioning? What made you talent roll that Cartel Marauder? And as you see it now, kind of what benefits have you got from it?
Yeah, it was just immediately to get shots on Merle, part of it, and to set me up for subsequent turns for shots on ZZ. Chasing green would have been dicey with that rock, and it's good I didn't chase, because I would have followed Torkhil's path and not had shots. But yeah, the thought was to get shots on Merle, and in subsequent turns to get a shot on ZZ, hopefully.
I had the same feeling when I watched this game live, where I absolutely loved the boost from Torkhil, which seems like such a simple thing, but it cleared out space, obviously, for the talent roll, which I didn't know was coming at the time, but just keeps Torkhil that bit more relevant, so that in future turns he has the ability to kind of swing back around and join up again with the rest of the list. And then that talent roll, it's probably not going to put a lot of damage into Merle. It probably isn't going to put any damage into Merle, but it makes Merle think. And Merle, has now to decide whether he wants to keep turning in and trying to chip shots into these Khiraxzes, or whether he now needs to disengage again. And if he does, that takes so much pressure off of your list.
You've also forced ZZ back out of the fight, haven't you? Had she gone back up into the corner, as per my plan, then my thought that you're only ever going to face 2 Khiraxz is incorrect. Next turn, you're facing 3, and that's a disaster. But it also meant that ZZ couldn't really stay where she was after this turn in, because her 5 straight escape through these top 2 asteroids was going to be blocked up by yellow next turn. So it put a lot of pressure onto a lot of different bits of the list, and I think it was a really nicely planned maneuver. ZZ boosting to get out of the way is in the arc of Torkhil, so initiative zeroed. And although she was out of the arc of red, green with some more good attack dice has chipped a damage through. Not often you get to kind of put early damage into ZZ. That's quite nice.
Yeah.
We see this unmodded Khiraxz shot into Merle, which doesn't do anything. But I think, nevertheless, I really like that position following that talent roll. And we're now going to get the side arc shot from Torkhil. ZZ has 2 focus at this point, thanks to her ability. And just praising your attack dice, and they've just completely disappeared. So no further damage done.
And of course, we didn't speak about this earlier, but ZZ having 2 tokens combos with her Procket and Advanced Optics, so it makes them just that bit more reliable.
Yeah, something which might be about to become incredibly relevant. So nice range one shot from Merle, 3 hits, but equally nice evade dice from the Khiraxz, so only taking 1 damage. And now we find out whether this Procket is lined up. And it isn't, question mark? Or it just is.
He's got it.
He's got it, but it looks like by millimeters.
Yep.
But this is big. So yeah, exactly as Lloyd was describing, now has the ability to advance optics 1 blank here, spend the focus to sort out any others. And doing exactly that is going to result in another 5-hit Procket. 2 crits for the marksmanship. And only the 1 evade from Torkhil. So Torkhil is going to be taking 2 shields and then 2 crits. Could kill him, but would need unlucky crits. And gets a loose stabilizer and a damage sensor array. So I think maybe slightly unlucky. Easy was able to squirrel out of a couple of shots, only taking the 2 incoming shots, but to have both of her focus left for the end is a little bit unlucky. But Torkhil living, which is important. Much more open game now. Everything, the kind of formations are broken down a bit, and got to think this is when the A-Wing should start to come into their own. They're much happier having a series of individual fights than they are trying to face the sort of a list as a whole. Again, at this stage in the match, are you kind of focused about kind of keeping your list together, trying to regroup and kind of form a block again, or facing the same way, or are you happy now for it to break down into kind of dogfights all over the place?
I'm okay with the breakdown, mostly because ZZ and Sefton they're 1 away from half, which, I mean, I got, a stray shot can push 1 through, which is what happened on both of them, and if I get that again, then he's in a pretty bad situation on points. I'm not feeling too bad. Torkhil he's on fire right now, but I don't know. I want to trade right now is what my thought is. If he comes in and gets shot somewhere, I want to be able to put shots back at him and hopefully trade up or trade even.
Absolutely. And with a Torkhil now down to 2 health and with a loose stabilizer, are you the kind of player, I mean, also stressed, right? But are you the kind of player that is going to look at, well, of course I'm doing a straight and I'm going to clear this crit because I've only got 2 health and trading 1 away to be slightly less predictable isn't worth it? Or is it more kind of do something crazy, try and get away from ZZ at the expense of 1 damage?
It crossed my mind. I've got the hull upgrade, so I could survive and do a non-straight. But no, my goal here was to do a straight turn in, I think, with red and green to just try and put shots again and just to trade back so that if he goes for the easy shots on Torkhil, assuming I do a straight, I can shoot him back and hopefully half him or kill him. You never know.
So Lloyd, from Marcel's point of view, how does he approach it from here? The temptation is to go and finish off Torkhil, but if you lose a ship in doing that, I think you're in a real bad state. Do you have to continue to be cautious and try and sort of plink shots here and there?
We've had, I mean, what feels like a lot of turns, in reality it's not, but we're only 40 minutes into the game, so we've got quite a lot of time left. I think we can see here Marcel's brought Merle in quite quickly and aggressively, and I think Merle, obviously being the cheapest of the A-Wings, is the one you can afford to have take shots. He's your least valuable endgame piece. But he has now a real potential to kill Torkhil over this next couple of turns. There's not much Torkhil can do to get away from Merle if Merle is just following. So I think if I was in Marcel's situation, I'd be pretty content to trade half of Merle for the rest of Torkhil. The points trade is slightly in your favour, but also once Torkhil is off the board, it's much, much easier to pick those cartels apart when you're not running the risk of getting initiative killed every time. And again, just it takes off a 180 arc, so it opens up the board so much for you. So I think from Marcel, there's no rush. He still has plenty of time. He still has ships that are incredibly manoeuvrable, can dance around the board, can rotate their arcs. There's certainly no need to be rushing to try and get shots in.
And Scott, the K turns there, I think, were interesting. I think I'd have been inclined to bank to the left to catch ZZ if he were to kind of just bank in to try and finish Torkhil off. But actually, exactly as we see here, as soon as Torkhil moves, then the obvious ZZ move is the straight that we've just seen him do. And had you banked out, you'd have been getting no shots. Whereas at least here, you're putting a little bit of pressure onto Merle. So it Was that kind of thought process you kind of decided you weren't going to be able to catch ZZ?
I think I thought that ZZ might just do a hard left and turn away. Seeing Torkhil as the obvious target, maybe he would see that too. But so I was playing for a ZZ who was running away there.
And what we've seen instead is the real value of the hull upgrade now, as Torkhil is alive on 1 health.
Yep, has one more shot to face this round, so not out of the woods yet. But we've got these Khiraxz firing first. Really want to be stripping a focus token with this guy. Only 1 hit, so not likely to. 4 dice from Merle, and that is an interesting decision. So has the focus and decides to spend to save that shield. I don't know that I would have,
And that is because you have forgotten automated target priority.
Well, okay. And so exactly as Lloyd says, Merle able to suspend the focus because knows she's getting the calculate back. Not quite as powerful. Ooh, and blanks, and that is big.
That is big.
So blank out from Merle there. Gets her automated target priority, calculate back, but Torkhil is alive. So 1, potentially able to get his ability and shots happening next turn, and 2, has not yet given up his points. Scott, you're actually behind at this point. Need to find some points from somewhere, but as you said, at least 2 of these A-Wings are one-off giving up half points. And with the K-turns in a nice place now to kind of threaten the centre of the board. So you can turn arcs into the place that Torkhil's going to run away to, which is quite a nice situation to be in. Means that Marcel's not going to be able to kind of risk-free get rid of Torkhil.
Yeah, this gets me back to my comfort zone of slow roll for a turn, see where he goes, and then make a new decision after that. I don't expect too much to happen the next turn.
Absolutely. And these A-Wings are an interesting list, aren't they, Lloyd? Like, they've got a fair amount of punching power, but they do kind of need to be flown like this by Marcel. So 1, I think it's quite a high burden of execution list. I think the opportunity to make mistakes is quite high. And 2, you're almost always going to have one of your 4 ships that isn't in the fight. And I think we've seen that on every turn so far, that there's been an A-Wing pointing in the wrong direction and not getting shots.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen 5 resistance A-Wings be successful at various times. And they've always tended to win by sort of paper cutting lists to death. And so what Marcel's done here, and I think I'm right in saying that this list is his creation, is that by swapping one of those out, you can afford proton rockets on 3 of the 4, and it gives you that real punch. So it does give you the ability to, if a ship does get isolated, go in and really pick things off very quickly, as we saw right at the start with Seevor. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting list, and it's not a list that flies similar to many other lists that I can immediately think of. It's certainly interesting, but I think you're right. It's a very high burden of execution. It's certainly a list that I suspect is very easy to fly badly, and it's probably not a list you're going to see me running anytime in the near future.
Yeah, it's so far out of my comfort zone. It's not true. And Scott, you said you watched a lot of Marcel's games. Does he ever group them all together and joust stuff? Or is it always this ducking in and out kind of gameplay?
They were always spread every time. Now, sometimes he would get aggressive and kind of jam into a swarm, especially with Merle. Merle really didn't get to do that at all so far this game, which is great for me. Merle didn't get to do any of his tricks.
Yeah, you've done a really nice job of almost by letting Merle have that flank. You've turned off everything that's scary about her.
Right. A couple 2 dice or 3 dice at range 1 shots. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's definitely superior to being intimidated and having the pilot ability proc and all of that. So we see here that regroup turn. All the Khiraxz now nicely pointed in the right direction. Red and green with overlapping arcs and focus tokens and really cannot be approached. And I think Marcel's made the right decision here to run away. Torkhil so kind of fleeing back to their protective embrace and ZZ trying his best to come around the corner here, but not quite getting arc on.
And Torkhil's cleared both crits now, so now I can rotate or boost again, depending on what I need to do, which was a big deal, especially thank goodness for Moldy Crow. I've already got 2 focus tokens.
But Sefton turning back in here, and looks like she is going to be able to get a shot. And Torkhil's going to have 3 evade dice at range 3. Should survive, but it's going to be nice for Marcel if he's able to take Torkhil off the table. Ooh, and that's not going to help. 2 blanks, but we do have heroic, and you can see Marcel's very excited about that.
Yep.
And wow, that's not how Heroic is meant to work. Should be rolling blanks into blanks, but gets the 2 hits there. But good evade dice from Torkhil, spends a focus, but crucially remains alive.
I feel like Heroic is either the most wholesome or most frustrating card, depending on which side of the table it's on.
Oh, I absolutely hate it, facing it. So red Cartel Marauder out of range, though. But green has a shot. Rolling 2 hits after the focus spend. Well, should be okay, but maybe a little bit worried. Spends the focus to take nothing. And does have a further shot coming in from yellow here. Again, range 3, but no defensive tokens left. And oof, huge roll there. Hit, crit, crit. Merlin, big trouble. Merlin, really big trouble. Taking shields. And all of a sudden is halved. Last shot of the round is going to be Merle into the green Khiraxz, who is already shield down. 2 more damage for half. That looks like 1 hit. And we get the evades there. No further damage done. And we are into the next turn with Scott having taken the lead 68-60. So you're looking in a pretty nice place here. We'll go on to talk about the next turn in a moment, but perhaps before we do, we can go a little bit more into something you mentioned earlier. You said that you'd watched Marcel play and were kind of prepared for the list. That looks like it's something that's really helped you in this match.
That's why it's so great this guy's on Gold Squadron all the time. I saw 5 or 6 games of basically this exact list.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, I'm a big fan of going on stream, but it does give your opponents, if they're so interested, a real chance to kind of go in and assess you. Once you start to accumulate enough of that footage, that people can get a real feel for you. Like, your style becomes known. And then it's almost like when you play the same person too often, right? You start doing kind of increasingly wacky and weird things just to catch each other out.
I think the people it hurts the most are people with a distinctive list or a distinctive play style. So I think there are players who it's still helpful, but you can't really kind of predict what they're about to do with any degree of certainty. And I think players maybe like Julian Hood, I think that I've watched a lot of his games, I played him a lot, and he is just good and makes the right decision. So it wasn't super useful to know that going in. Whereas somebody with a more distinctive play style, like an Ollie Pocknell or a Dale Cromwell, I've seen games where they're really hurt by it, and their opponents knowing what they're about to do is something that I think you then at that level have to kind of come up with a way of solving, and I'm not really sure how you go about doing that. But I've certainly seen games where Dale's kind of elements of surprise has gone because everyone knows he's going to be a lunatic. And I've played against Ollie in games myself where you worry less about the aggressive move because it's so much less likely to happen. So yeah, definitely something interesting. And maybe next time we have one of those guys on, we can talk to them about whether that's something that they think about and something that they try and address. Here we're kind of getting towards the end game, Scott. 20 minutes left. You're up on points, but only very slightly, and obviously still need to be really worried about Torkhil.
Yes, the half points on Merle last turn was really brutal for him. Don't know if that should have happened statistically or not, but getting ahead on points here was a big deal. I know he's going to finish off or get half points somewhere. Nobody's damaged except for Torkhil, so he's got to be coming in for Torkhil this turn, right? I mean, that's my thought. And if he does, I've got the easy banks to cover again. To if he shoots and kills Torkhil, then I can trade back and half point or maybe kill one of these A-Wings.
Yeah, and Torkhil on 59 points, Zizi on 54. So if you were to half point Zizi and lose Torkhil, you lose some of your lead, but you're still just ahead. And I think, just those previous 2 turns of moves, easy to overlook them, viewers, because there wasn't an awful lot of firing happening. But this is the position that it's given Scott, and he's really going to reap the benefits this turn. Had he been a bit more aggressive, had he tried to chase ships and thought less about his overall position, he could have been in a bit of a mess by this stage. But now, lucky half of an A-Wing maybe, but in a position where there are no easy targets for Marcel, and Marcel's going to have to work really hard to get more points without giving up some.
I do have, I think, a question and then a comment, or maybe a comment and then a question. So I think for almost any turn of this game, other than the first one or two where you were just sort of setting up and rolling in, every time you look at the board, there has been a point where the arcs of your Khiraxzes have been cutting the board in half one way or the other. And so every time you've been limiting the places in which Marcel can get to safely. And in order to get to anywhere past your list, he has to fly through the entirety of the list first. So I think you've done a really good job of kind of shepherding him around, as we said at the start. And then my question actually was about action selection. So with the Khiraxzes, we've only ever seen you focus. Is that a conscious thing because of their low initiative, or is it like, do you ever take lots with them on the anticipation that there's definitely not going to be anything to fire at?
I will occasionally. I didn't this game because, like you said, the initiative, I don't know where he's going, and he's got rear arcs. I just want to make sure I have a defensive mod if I'm not getting a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the 2 agility, the Khiraxzes can give up points quickly and easily. Again, it's a kind of playstyle choice, right? You would rather be conservative with them, keep their arcs wide, give them the flexibility either way, rather than kind of perhaps build for that turn where you can get those double modified hits.
Right, just don't give up shots.
Yeah, and so we're coming into important turn of firing here. We can see again Torkhil's ability hugely important, able to initiative 0 Seftin, which means that procket is not going to happen until red has fired. There's no opportunity to take red off the table. Had Torkhil not been able to do that, Marcel may have been able to initiative kill red and then go and kill Torkhil later, but without the opportunity to do that, he tries to take Torkhil off the board, gets a nice 2 hits, but really a timely evade roll there from Torkhil. It's got down to 1 health relatively easily, but then decided that he's not going to die today. Rolls the 2 evades. We get a shot into the initiative 0 Seftin here from the yellow Marauder, but I think the more important shots are likely to be those from the other 3 ships. Having said that, 3 hits is not bad. Has a focus token that he really does not want to spend, but is going to have to. That focus token goes away, you get half points, and there is no proton rocket this turn. That is a really good outcome from the 1 shot onto green. And now a choice of targets. We've got ZZ on 3, but actually maybe a more attractive option is what you go for here, which is Seftin on 2 with no defensive tokens. 2 hits from Torkhil, not even having to spend a focus, but 2 evades this time. I think if it was me, I'd check red next because I'm not sure that he's got Seftin in arc. Give you a bit of information about where to go with green after red has fired. But you go for green first, range 2 into either, not obstructed. Following up into Seftin makes sense given the lack of tokens. But a poor roll, only the 1 hit. And Seftin easily able to avoid that. And now just red remaining to fire. Seftin just in. Nice hit crit. Going to be able to keep the focus. No focuses there, and is that a dead Seftin? That is indeed. Wow. And so I was talking about how important Torkhil was. I didn't realise he was going to be quite that important. That feels huge.
That was a big deal. I was just concerned about the proton rocket, and and then he ended up dying, which maybe he should have, given all the guns ahead on him.
But yeah, it's that real multiplicative value of Torkhil, right? Like, it means that you can prolong the proton rocket to make sure red gets a shot, and then you end up stripping the focus so the proton rocket isn't happening at all, and then you initiative kill the ship so you don't take any shot at all. It's incredible value from that Hawk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd kind of, for all the world, thought that ZZ was going to be the target there. But again, shows the importance of sort of taking your shots in the right order. Yellow didn't have a choice, was only ever going to shoot Seftin, and so that's the ship you went with first. And the fact that you plinked that damage through and stripped the token suddenly made him the sensible choice to target. And had you fired Torkhil red and green first, they may all have wasted their shots into a double token ZZ before yellow had given you that information. So small decisions, keeping the ships together, thinking about the positioning maybe over being aggressive, and making the right choices when it comes to the order in which to activate your ships and what they're targeting, and they're all paying dividends. Marcel now in a real hole. We've got a nearly 60-point gap. Torkhil's still sort of a relatively easy source of 29 points, but these Cartel Marauders haven't taken any damage other than green 1 shield. 6 health. He is still 2 off half, which would not be enough. So Marcel looking at needing to finish off Torkhil and kill a Khiraxz. And with 12 minutes left, that sounds difficult. I think at this point, Lloyd, he needs to divide his ships. Looking at where they are, maybe send ZZ off after Torkhil and bring Merlin with the unenviable task of trying to kill a whole Khiraxz.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got so many things that you need to take off the table now with so few turns to do it. Scott, actually, what I wanted to ask you here was we saw Torkhil come in and rotate his arc. Can you talk me through a little bit of that thought process? Because when I saw it for the first time, I was really surprised that you rotated, obviously at the cost of a stress.
Yeah, I probably should have boosted just to get a little more distance away from the bad guys. I was just trying to get shots, get arc and initiative 0 something.
I actually don't mind it. I think by rotating the arc, you cover more of the board and gives ZZ a difficult choice of whether to stay in Green's arc there or to barrel roll out, arc dodge, but get initiative 0'd and take the shot from Torkhil. And we see that, given that difficult choice, ZZ decides to roll into Torkhil's arc, taking fewer dice, but is initiative 0'd. Torkhil having 2 dice here at the side arc. Nice 2 hits. Oof, and a blank out there from ZZ. Does she have a focus token? She does not. Having, I think, barrel rolled and rotated the arc as her action. So further 2 damage into ZZ. Going to give her a focus for the attack, but that takes her down to 1 health and scores more points for Scott. That is a disaster. Really needs to kill Torkhil here now. Does at least get the hit focus. 2 shots, need paint from Torkhil and the blank out, and Torkhil dies. But that half points is huge. Now looking at 145 to 89. 50 points needed to be scored. And we're looking at a marauder and a half in 10 minutes with ZZ facing out of the fight. Tempted to say, Lloyd, this is not winnable.
It's definitely not easy. I think, again, here actually it comes back to you, Scott. It depends a little bit on your style here. So you could just turn the green cartel away, give Marcel essentially no shot with ZZ. Are you that kind of player, or are you more looking at the point of, well, ZZ has 1 health, here's my chance to finish her off?
Yeah, I'm more of an aggressive mindset at this point. With 1 health on ZZ, even with the potentially double defensive mods, and Merle potentially like an initiative kill with no shields. Boy, I'm still nervous of Marcel, and if I run away, can he just plink at me and half point me and kill me? And that's probably the wrong choice, but I'm just nervous of running against an A-Wing, so I like my odds if I go in to push 1 damage through somewhere. My ships are still very healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably not necessarily a wrong answer, but you can see here Marcel having to be very cautious and rolling with ZZ to avoid the arc. So has a shot, but it's unmodded and at range. So the likelihood of doing anything significant is pretty low, but at this stage, he doesn't have many choices, right? A single damage into ZZ definitely ends the game for him.
Yeah, and ZZ does at least get a damage through onto Green there. Green, the Khiraxz already damaged, so now 1 above half. Not got any shots itself. Merle is going to be taking a shot from red here. Khiraxz rolling a nice 2 hits there. Again, seeing the automated target priority come into effect. So we get a plus side of automated target priority initially, allowing the focus spend on defense to save some damage, but now a massive negative in that Marcel is unable to target the green Khiraxz here. Looks like he is doing anyway, which is an interesting way to get around that. So easy to make a mistake, especially at this point in the game when you're so far behind. But in reality, should have shot red there as per automated target priority.
I think we do correct it in a minute.
Oh yeah, looks like whoever was streaming it came in and started pointing stuff out. So Scott, while we've got a brief lull here, what are your thoughts on automated targeting priority as an upgrade?
Yeah, automated target priority, I like it. Often I just take the value shots anyways at what's closest. You don't always want to do that, but I think it's a good one, especially for Merle, who's just jumping in close anyways.
Yeah, you feel like he's going to often be spending to stay alive anyway.
Yeah, we've seen that happen a couple times, so I think that's a great choice on such a low initiative ship.
I think he might be the first ship I've not hated it on. Like, it's cheap enough that I think it's interesting, but I don't ever like having decisions made for me, I must admit.
I was going to say that, Lloyd. I think I don't absolutely hate it on Merle, and I absolutely hate it on almost everything else. But it's pros and cons, isn't it? And I think, Scott, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I've not seen it like that. I suppose the choice you're making is I'd have a Merle who is able to shoot what it wants, but with no modification. And the choice you would make is, well, you take the highest amount of attack dice with some mods, and you're better off doing some damage to a suboptimal target rather than nothing to the thing you really want to shoot. And I think there's definitely value in that decision. But yeah, I'm like Lloyd. I just dread the turn where I really, really need to take something, get off the board before the next turn, and I'm not able to because I'm not allowed to shoot at it.
And so this turn we see you disengaging or switching targets from ZZ to Merle. And is that simply that Merle is the easiest ship to track? You can reposition and adjust to where he's going to be?
Yeah, I felt pretty confident Merle was going to be coming in or doing something that way, especially moving before me. I felt I had good odds of getting a shot on this turn.
Marcel feels like time is really running out, and so he's having to shift to big Hollywood plays.
Yep.
And we see that's not really paying off this turn. 3 hits from the Khiraxz. Merle only getting 1 evade after the token spend and is removed from the table before shooting. And with a couple of Marauders 1 off half, but only 5 minutes left, nothing really realistically that Marcel can do to get back into this game. And well played, Scott. I think a really interesting game. Really nice kind of matchup in terms of the lists, both trying to do different things and both with definite strengths and weaknesses. And I think in the end, what won it for you is that cautious approach, always keeping your options open and only ever really committing hard on the turns where you kind of had to and you were going to get a huge benefit from it. And obviously by that, I'm talking about the turn you killed Tali, where that decision making put you ahead to have that cautious approach to the rest of the game. We see ZZ turning in here, kind of nothing really else to do. Gets 2 hits. Red. Yep, this is a competition. The MOV was important, so deciding to spend and not take the damage there, which I think is very, very sensible. And now ZZ having to shrug off 3 shots does have focus evade, but the unmodded with 2 hits, which is a nice start. And having to spend the evade early, this looks like a ZZ who might be dead by the end of this turn, especially with that just being in range. So we're going to get 3 dice into 4 here, focus on either side. Hit crit from the Khiraxz. No focus token left now, having to spend to stay alive. And we've got a range 2 shot here with a focus token into naked ZZ. And I've got to say, I'm at this point expecting her to die. Another hit crit. And that's game. Well played. So, really interesting game. Thank you ever so much for coming on. I know you went ahead to get to the top 16 of this tournament, and so huge congratulations for that. I believe it's a 400 player plus tournament. That's a massive achievement. This game in particular, and over the course of the tournament, did you kind of pick up new tips and tricks for the list, learn how to approach different lists with it, or was it kind of just a case of it being a list you were comfortable with and kind of just kept doing the right thing all the way through?
This one taught me to be a little more careful with Captain Seevor. Don't let him get caught out too far ahead. I only got to trade a shield for the whole captain, which wasn't ideal. But yeah, flying in tight blocks as appropriate. Tried a few jousting tricks, but this obviously wasn't a jousting list. A lot of people just jousted me, even late in the tournament, and I was very surprised by that. I expected more KG gameplay like I got from Marcel here.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? If you've bought a list that wants to joust and you come up against something that jousts harder than you, it doesn't always leave you with a lot of options, but I think accepting you have an inferior joust and taking it is accepting defeat.
Right.
But yeah, again, surprised by the number of people that do it. So what kind of lists does your list struggle against? What are the kind of things that you tend to get beaten by?
My one loss in Swiss was 2 resistance, beef, 3 X-Wings, and 2 escape pods. And that was just better. It was the Jess and Bastion and Rose.
Sure, it's right at the point where you can't then initiative kill an X-Wing because they're just slightly too beefy.
Right. I need to just hit the joust just right, and I think that's a tough joust for me. I did it anyways, but he had the initiative on me, and he could ace play me if he really wanted to.
Yeah, that feels like a very evenly matched joust, maybe slightly in the Resistance's favour. On that, is that in a list that you would consider? Sort of seems a similar play style, but maybe has slightly fewer answers against the kind of real AC ships?
Boy, it seems fun. Just flying at people has a high floor.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. I like the Torkhil upgrade. It just seems mean to play against, and the Seevor combo, it's really good. I should try more of the resistance stuff. Flying at people, beefy right now, that's very strong in the meta. The generics just keep dropping in points. I don't think that's a bad way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lloyd, from Marcel's point of view, I think it's hard to be too critical. Perhaps maybe other than that he's slightly overcommitted, and only slightly, but slightly overcommitted to get Seevor off the board on that kind of second turn of firing.
Yeah, it felt like Seevor was slightly hung out to dry, but that ended up working massively in Scott's favour because it pulled Marcel into an engagement in a place where he didn't necessarily want to be, in a place that he had few options and ways of getting out of. But in the same way, in a lot of these kind of games do, where it's something a bit AC against something a bit beefy, there were some 50-50s, and Scott, as far as I can recall, basically called every single one correctly.
Yeah, he certainly didn't do a bad job. The temptation with hindsight is to think that Marcel would have benefited from not committing on that turn and from flying around a bit more, maybe trying to get Scott to break up his list for a few more turns before committing. But equally, had Marcel decided to hard turn left or to 5 straight with Tali on that second turn of engagement, then Tali wouldn't have died. We'd have had all of Scott's ships pointing into a corner where there were no opponent's ships. And it would look very different. Cool. So I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you again, Scott, for coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lloyd, for joining me as always.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for watching. We will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.